in peace. I don't care what anyone says, it's the greatest metal album of all time. Countless iconic riffs, ambitious yet catchy songwriting, fun and goofy vocals, and of course, those absolutely mind-blowing guitar solos. So it goes without saying, of course, that Marty Friedman's solos on this album were incredibly influential on me. And really shaped the way that I play guitar, and I'm sure I'm not alone on that. When I first started out on guitar and attempting to learn all of these solos, I had to rely on crappy, primitive ASCII, plain text internet tabs and like crappy tab books, as well as my very underdeveloped ears at that point. And so while I was able to sort of like kind of bluff my way through playing Tornado of Souls, Hangar 18, Holy Wars, etc., I always knew that what I was playing wasn't completely right. And honestly, fast forward to today, and it's not much different. Believe it or not, there's still a shocking lack of accurate transcriptions for this stuff. There's just always something missing, like always some details missing, and like some small, just like inaccuracies that just mount up, and it's just like, it's not quite there. So last year, I thought, fuck it. I'm sick of seeing people learning and teaching this stuff all wrong and spreading fake news, misinformation. So I took it on myself to thoroughly transcribe every Marty solo from Rust in Peace and make full video lessons and tabs and backing tracks for all of this stuff to share with all of you guys. I'm super proud of the results, and I'm confident in saying that this is probably as good as you're going to get in terms of accurate transcriptions. I know his style inside out and all these little sort of like intricacies and stuff, and I've spent God knows how many countless hours just like scouring through the isolated guitar tracks of this stuff. And as usual, you can download this entire package of tabs, backing tracks, and full video lessons from my online guitar school at patreon.com/BradleyHallGuitar. You can sign up for a free 7-day trial at the link in the description below and just download everything for free. Anyway, the point of this video, scouring through all of these isolated solo tracks, I discovered so many really cool, interesting things that actually solved a lot of mysteries surrounding these solos and things that have really sort of like escaped me, and I think like other guitarists for years who have like never been quite able to like replicate certain things about these solos, but I never really sort of understood why. So I thought it would be pretty fun if we go through all of the isolated tracks together for these solos. I'll take you through them song by song and show you my findings. Just a quick disclaimer though, that this is going to get very, very nerdy. So let's hop into it. So here I've got my Reaper session open with all of the isolated Marty Friedman solo tracks from the original Rust in Peace album recordings. And what we're going to do is I'm going to take you through each of the songs and highlight some particular moments of interest that I think are very cool and sort of will shed some light, I think, on how these solos were put together, and also explain a few sections which have always sort of miffed me and lots of other guitarists online who have tried to cover this stuff, because there's a few sections in some of these solos which are never played accurately, and are pretty much impossible to replicate, and I'm going to tell you why that is. Alright, so first off, we're going to have a look at Holy Wars. So in the first solo, where are we? Yeah, so this section. So you can hear that this solo was recorded in two very, defined different takes. See here, like the slide out from the bend sort of overlaps with the run in the next section. And you can't really hear that on the original recording. It's sort of like the full mix kind of masks this cut. But once you hear it in the isolated tracks, it's very, very obvious that this was like two different solos cut together. Because how people often wrote solos back in these days, like during like the tape days, I suppose, and I think maybe still these days, but probably not so much, is that people used a technique, I think they called it comping, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I'm pretty sure it was called comping, where they would sort of record lots of different takes, either of like the same thing or just sort of like improvising lots of different takes, and then the solos were sort of like stitched together, sometimes very well and sometimes very crudely afterwards, which is interesting because people often go on about like the tape days of being the golden age of musicians, or like because everyone was so tight and couldn't rely on like digital wizardry, and so people were sort of very renowned for being able to just sort of flawlessly play through solos in one take. But ironically, even like the biggest bands and the best players, they did shit like this where they would just sort of like cut solos together after the fact, and not necessarily have like the final solo as the solo that was like performed, like on the spot in one take on the day, which is very interesting, I think. And there is a lot of that stuff going on this album. Like, I was always under the impression, and I'm sure many other people are as well, that a lot of these solos were just sort of like fucking one take bangers that he just sort of like smashed out on the spot, and then that was that. And that is the case for some of them, and like some of the sections are obviously done in like one long go, but a lot of this stuff is very obviously stitched together. And so yeah, so Holy Wars, this is a very, very obvious example. Like, a lot of the examples are way less obvious than this, but this is probably the most like obvious one. We also have something at the end of the second solo. Yeah, here, this is a weird one. As far as I can tell, this solo is done in one take, minus the very end. But there, you can hear that cut. If you listen very carefully, when you cut two takes together and you don't crossfade them properly, you get this very sort of like obvious sort of jump. It like cuts like every so slightly. You sort of like lose that sort of natural organic like string noise that you would have in between sections, but you can hear there's sort of like a very quick moment where it's sort of like silence. For some reason, it hasn't been crossfaded. Right here. So I don't know why they did that, but maybe they just decided that they wanted a different end for the solo. Maybe the original end that he recorded for this solo, maybe they didn't like it. Very odd, but yeah, that's definitely a sneaky little cut there. So next up, we have Hangar 18. So this is an interesting one. So all of the first mini solos, these are all done in one go. I've gone over these loads of times, and these are all just like one take bangers. All this stuff. That's all one take. But this, though, this is probably the worst offender on the whole album. I don't know what the fuck happened here. Maybe it's because it sort of like changes like tempo at this point. But this cut is really not good. Like, listen to this. Just like the whole last note of that phrase is missing for some reason. It just sort of like cuts really crudely into it. And I wasn't sure if this was just like this specific instance of like the isolated tracks that I found, but I've checked various different other ones and it's all the same. And actually, if you listen to, even in the original mix, if you listen really closely, you can hear it. Maybe there's like a pickup note when he starts the, this thing. It sounds like he's maybe going like a little sort of like pickup, like dead note. Like that. Maybe that. So I think it's maybe the combination of that and just the cutting of the last phrase. Yeah, but it's like really crude. I mean, obviously doing this shit on tape back in the day was like way, way harder and a massive challenge compared to recording digitally now, which is a piece of cake. So this is another very strange one later on in the solo. So as far as I can hear, this is all done in one take up until like this point. Right, here. Can you hear that? I'm going to play it a few more times. There's like a click, or like a clip or something. I can't quite hear exactly what it is. At first I thought, oh no, this is surely just some like fucking audio glitch, or like some artifact left on like this this specific like MP3 of the isolated tracks. But actually, if you listen to the original mix, you can hear it. It's there. If you listen really closely for it, you can hear this sort of like clipping sound. It's very odd. I think it's either like a really badly done like chopping together of like two takes, and there's like a very obvious like clip in the audio. But it sounds more like a physical sort of like clicking noise. It's like something maybe hitting like the microphone or something. I don't know. And it does sound like it's chopped together, so I want to say that this is just like two takes chopped together, and it's just clipping for some reason. There's just another clipping file, I guess. But yeah, I'd never noticed that until very recently. But yeah, this seems to be two different takes to cut together here. So yeah, this phrase. So this is one of those moments, and there's two more of these, I think, later on, where it's just impossible to replicate this sound because this is obviously a cut as well. This bend. It's just a lot more subtle, but it's not until you actually start trying to play this stuff, you realize how the fuck is that meant to sound like that. Because this is a pre-bend, right? It's going like... So A, there's no like string noise or anything like before that bend. It's like really clean. When you're going that fast and you're doing a pre-bend, there's no way you're not going to hear a little bit of the note moving up because it's just too quick. Like you can't go like... Yeah? You're not hearing any of the note moving up at all. So this is obviously sort of like cut in, and it's sort of like maybe like chopped off like the first bit of the bend. So like of like the note, you know, moving up a bit, or maybe it's just like a completely different take that they stitched together. But it gives it this very cool sound that is just like impossible to replicate, basically. Because like if you have a very keen ear for this stuff, and if you've listened to this stuff like as much as I do, and I'm sure like many of you you have as well, you'll hear that like whenever you hear somebody cover this, or even when you hear like Megadeth guitarists do this live, it never sounds exactly like this. Like I've always strived to try and replicate exactly how like this stuff is played. And it's just impossible to replicate exactly how that phrase is done. Alright, and speaking of these weird, like, hard to replicate things, there's another one in Take No Prisoners. There's not much else to talk about in this song, but yeah, there's this one very specific section that always baffled me, because I could never get it to sound right. Like this. So yeah, this section here. This. Because, like, that sounds fucking insane. And, like, in the full mix, I was always like, how the fuck are you meant to get it to sound like that? Because it sounds like... sounds almost like a wah, right? It sounds like a wah with just some like very wide vibrato, but it's not. Initially I thought maybe he was doing this kind of thing. Yeah, this kind of thing. So if you like very quickly hit your pickup selector from the neck to the bridge position, you get an almost sort of like pseudo wah kind of sound. Because it's sort of like sweeping through the frequencies very quick, like a wah does. Like that, and it sort of like opens the sound up. And you can sort of kind of get it to sound like that if you do that technique. Yeah, like that kind of thing. But I don't think he's doing that. That seems like way too intricate. But then, once I listen to the isolated tracks enough, and you can actually hear that it's a cut. Yeah, it's like a binary thing. It's just going from like... I'm not sure whether like this was like the same thing cut together or like two different takes, but I don't know. Whatever it did, it worked and it sounds fucking sick. But again, impossible to replicate. Okay, the next example to talk about is the main solo in Five Magic. So I remember reading years ago that he struggled with this one a bit, I think because... obviously it's in a weird time signature. It's in 5/8, this solo. And it makes sense because if you listen to this solo, this was another one that was obviously stitched together. Like done in sections. This is all done through. Pretty sure that's a cut there. Yeah, you can hear the sort of like the... Yeah, if you listen very closer, you just hear like the... Yeah, it sort of like goes into it a little bit jarringly. And here. But that's a lot more obvious of a cut there. Yeah, you hear the sort of like the jumping into it where it hasn't been crossfaded. Things like this in like the isolated tracks, that it gives you a bit of an insight into how they were sort of like approaching this solo maybe. Because it's not like it's cut in random places like some of the other solos were when they were obviously just sort of like playing around with ideas and stuff. But this one seems to have a very definite sort of like every X amount of bars is cut, which sort of gives you the impression that, you know, they were sort of like maybe struggling for like, I don't know, either like the performance aspect of it perhaps, or I don't know, maybe they were sort of like struggling with ideas and they would just sort of like just take it, you know, X amount of bars at a time. All right, Poison was secure. So this is another example of one of those sort of like crazy, impossible to replicate things. I think like for me, this has always been the biggest mystery on the album. Other guitarists who have tried to learn this solo, maybe you'll agree. So what we have. Yeah, for a start, this fast like major 7 run thing, this was obviously cut in. That's an obvious cut right there. So this fucking weird bend, like this bend, I've spent so many hours of my life trying to work out what the fuck is going on in this bend. Because I've never seen anybody play it like this, like ever. It's just impossible to get it to sound like that. I've tried so many different combinations of things. The most common one you see is just people playing it like this. That's how most people play it. And on the surface, it sounds correct, like the notes are right, but that's obviously not what's going on here. Because like, really listen to it. It doesn't sound anything like that. The closest thing I could do to get it to sound like that is to do this kind of thing, where you're bending this, and then you're catching the 15th fret on the B string. But the trouble is with that, it's really hard not to get ringing from the E string. I bet you could maybe like manually mute the E string. Like that. That's more appropriate, because also, the dead giveaway that it's not that. Like, listen to the vibrato on the E. The vibrato's going down. It's not going up. Yeah, it's going like, listen to it. It's doing that. And you can't get that. You can't achieve that if you play it on the E string. You can only vibrato up if you're playing it here, right? Because you can't put the string back down the other way. And the only way you can achieve that is if you're like pre-bending the E string. So I'm pretty sure it's something like that. Also, I'm pretty sure that this is a cut as well, because you don't really hear the bend go up all the way. It sort of like starts in progress, so you sort of get this. It doesn't go like, you don't hear it go all the way up. And also, like, you can hear there's a slight sort of like clip when it comes in. There's no string noise before that note comes in. If it was all done in one take, it would be like noisier. There would be more shit going on. Yeah, and it's a similar thing to what we had with Take No Prisoners, where like the first bit of like the bend is missing or whatever because it's been sort of like cut. For me, this is still like the biggest mystery, is just like how to replicate this, because it's just very, very strange what's happening here. So yeah, definitely the most mysterious, enigmatic moment of all of the solos there. But it sounds so fucking sick, like how they put it together. Alright, moving on. Lucretia, there's not really too much to talk about here. This solo seems to have been done actually mostly in one take. But there is one moment that is very obviously cut with another take towards the end. Yeah, here. So that's a very obvious cut. But it's one that you don't really hear in the full mix. But when you hear it isolated, it's very obvious. You're doing this big like vibrato on 16. Yeah, but it sort of like cuts to doing a bend on the same note, but it's cutting like the first bit of the bend, so it just sounds very odd. It's really hard to replicate. So I'm assuming, I don't know, either they didn't like the performance of the last bit of the solo, or they wanted to try something different. But yeah, that's obviously an attempt at like trying to, you know, drop in at the same spot, but it not quite working. All right, Tornado. A couple of things to talk about here. There's a lot of like lore surrounding this solo, like people saying it's like improvised and stuff. I have no idea how much of that is true. It does seem like a lot of this solo is done in one take. Oh yeah, there's one thing I want to talk about, is there's one thing that everyone always gets wrong on this solo that you can't hear unless you listen to the isolated tracks. Alright, so it's this bit here. Yeah, so everyone always plays this as like tremolo picking. Everyone always does that. You can hear quite clearly it's like octaves and not tremolo picked. It's like got a swing to it. It's like going. You can hear it, it's doing that. Yeah, so these are octaves. But then he slides down to single notes. And I think it's because the octaves are like ever so slightly sort of like out of phase. Oh, just like this, because my guitar's a little bit out of tune. And so when you're playing that in like a full mix, I can understand that maybe it sounds a little bit like tremolo picking, I suppose. It creates a sort of like a weird phasing effect. All right, and then the only other bit to talk about is the ending, that infamous crazy ending. So you can hear, you got to really listen for it, but there is a single cut here. Yeah, here. So when he's doing this jump up here, he does this sort of like weird like, all that sort, I don't remember it, all that sort of gubbins around this point, and he jumps up to here. And it's a very quick jump, and like the rest of it is pretty messy, right? But again, there's no string noise before he jumps up there, and it's like a very sort of quick moment of like silence before that clip. Yeah, here. So yeah, that's quite clearly a little cut there. I mean, that could be for any number of reasons, like maybe the first time he played it, maybe it was like, I don't know, too sloppy, wasn't clean enough or something, or maybe they just wanted to try something a bit different for the ending. But yeah, it does sound like the majority of the Tornado solo is done, like through. I can't really hear many other cuts, maybe a couple of other ones, but it's like whatever. But yeah, this is like the main bit that I was like pretty interested in. It's just like this whole sort of crazy fast run at the end. So that is it. I know this was incredibly nerdy and very much an on the spectrum activity. But I really love doing stuff like this. It's so insightful and gives you an amazing insight into, you know, the process behind how these solos were put together. So I really do hope you guys enjoyed this. And like I said earlier, the entire Rust in Peace tablature pack and video lessons and backing tracks. You can sign up for a 7-day free trial and just download all of this stuff for free, as well as everything else that's available at the Guitar School. Take it all, I don't care. So cheers guys, I hope you enjoyed this, and I shall see you again very soon.
All right, mate, do that, then do that. Nice one.